Forrest Hylton, Colombia was a superstar at the last debate between McCain and Obama. McCain was defending, of course, the free trade agreement between the US and Colombia. He said it was a no-brainer. And obviously he excoriated Obama because, once again, he's never been to the south of the border. He didn't know what was happening over there. I'll play you the tape where Obama contradicts McCain on the free trade agreements, and he talks about something that apparently McCain had no idea about.
So Senator Obama, who has never traveled south of our border, opposes the Colombia Free Trade Agreement, the same country that's helping us try to stop the flow of drugs into our country.
Actually, I understand it pretty well. The history in Colombia right now is that labor leaders have been targeted for assassination on a fairly consistent basis, and there have not been prosecutions. And what I have said, because the free trade, the trade agreement itself does have labor and environmental protections, but we have to stand for human rights, and we have to make sure that violence isn't being perpetrated against workers who are just trying to organize for their rights.
So Forrest, that's my question. Did McCain know about what was happening on the ground in Colombia, or he had no idea? It would be just a bunch of leftist leaders or trade unionists killed, or peasants killed by paramilitary forces, and the only thing that really matters to him is this free trade agreement. So what's the real story?
Well, judging by McCain's visits to Afghanistan and Iraq and so forth, you know, where he's surrounded by a virtual battalion of bodyguards and goes to a popular market with a bulletproof vest on and says that, you know, people are happy and shopping and so forth. It's fair to say that when McCain visits a country, he doesn't actually visit the country in any significant way. So it was interesting to see the fact that McCain's so-called experience came across as anything but, because Obama clearly was much better informed than McCain about the actual situation on the ground in Colombia. And I guess that's what, you know, organized labor's campaign money is able to buy in this election season.
So you just returned from Colombia. You spent a few weeks there. Tell us what's really happening on the ground, not in the big centers, Bogota, Cali, Medellin, but in the countryside, and with the FARC as well.
Something like 13 or 14 indigenous leaders throughout Colombia have been assassinated in the last 2 weeks in accordance with the paramilitary threats that they received previous to their assassination. Right now, there is un estado de sitio, a state of siege, or conmoción interior, has been declared, which allows Uribe, of course, to militarize the country in response to indigenous protest. Actually, it was at first in response to a strike by employees of the judicial branch. Now it's in response to this massive indigenous mobilization that's going on as we speak. Uribe, of course, has accused indigenous leaders of having ties to the FARC, just as he accuses every trade unionist on strike of having ties to the FARC. So it was really ironic that as they spoke about this situation of assassination of trade union leaders, the assassination of indigenous leaders is taking place literally as we speak now. So Obama was clearly much better informed, but the fact is this. U.S. money and aid to Colombia is what has allowed the paramilitaries to really take over the country and to continue their assaults on trade union and indigenous rights movements. So we would really need a whole new approach to the concept of hemispheric security and so forth if we were going to actually change directions in policy.
And in fact, a group of scholars from the Latin American Studies Association, right, they are circulating a petition to be delivered to Obama, preaching exactly a new dialogue between North and South America, right?
Right. But, you know, my fear is that it's something akin to spitting in the wind, insofar as there isn't actually any progressive movement in the United States that could sort of put flesh on the bare bones of these types of proposals. As Mike Davis pointed out in a recent column discussing the differences between right now and the period of the 1930s and the New Deal, which of course excluded African Americans altogether, but that's a different discussion. The difference between now and the 1930s is that the 1930s saw the largest upsurge of mass direct action by the working class in favor of its own demands that we've ever seen in U.S. history. And right now, we don't have anything comparable that would pressure Obama to adopt a more progressive policy stance. Now, as Greg Grandin pointed out in his book Empire's Workshop, in fact, many of the platforms of the New Deal that Roosevelt adopted had everything to do with a shift in foreign policy towards Latin America with the good neighbor policy that was basically forced upon Roosevelt by, on the one hand, movements of peasant and worker resistance in Latin America, and on the other hand, industrial workers in the United States. It's the other hand that we're missing today. And therefore, I think it's very unlikely that Obama's going to take these progressive policy proposals seriously, because essentially he doesn't have to.
So essentially what you're saying is there's no realistic prospect of Obama burying the Monroe Doctrine and stop demonizing Venezuela, for instance, and understanding the power of social movements in Bolivia or in Ecuador. Is this what you're saying?
Absolutely. It's remarkable that in the last two debates, Venezuela was mentioned, but almost in passing as a sort of vaguely threatening enemy type of nation, when of course, all that would be necessary to repair the damage between U.S. and Venezuelan relations would be dialogue, negotiations. I mean, it'd be a very straightforward and simple thing to do, and it's exactly what Hugo Chavez would like. Hugo Chavez doesn't actually like being a quote-unquote enemy of the United States. He would very much like to be a friend of the United States government as well as the United States people. But that's really not the tone or the stance that's being adopted at all. The idea is that somehow Venezuela is vaguely menacing to U.S. national security, and that, of course, is utterly preposterous. What it really demonstrates, Pepe, is the utter disconnect of these presidential debates in relation to actual developments in the world. Things are happening now so quickly and on a scale of magnitude that it's very hard for us to bring it into focus. It's as though we're out there looking at the Grand Canyon and we can't see clearly exactly what the outlines of our present are.
And the Grand Canyon now is between North and South America.
Absolutely. Already, South America is simply moving in its own directions, and we've seen some flare-ups between Brazil and Ecuador recently around trade issues, but those are likely to be resolved in the short term, and in the medium and long term we're likely to see more ambitious programs of regional integration, the sort of thing we've been discussing here on the Real News.
And political integration via the UNASUR, for instance.
Political integration, economic integration, diplomatic integration, and the United States is completely out of the loop. Obama, as much as McCain, they don't really seem to have any idea that all this is already happening as we speak. These are what the Israelis like to call facts on the ground. And these are facts on the ground that simply aren't being taken into account. And whoever becomes president next is going to have to take them into account if they want to craft some sort of realistic policy.